Welcome to Building Better Communities with Bob Hart, the podcast that dives into the stories of the leaders in commercial real estate and beyond as they talk about their careers, the market, and what it takes to build better communities. On today's episode, Laurie Lustig Bauer, Executive Vice President at CBRE, and Tim Bauer, Senior Vice President at CBRE, both join Bob on the podcast.
Welcome to Building Better Communities. I'm Bob Hart, your host. Today I have two of my favorite people in the LA real estate industry, Laurie Lustig Bauer and Tim Bauer. These two are industry veterans of brokerage in Los Angeles. They've spent, Laurie 36 years, Tim 40 years in commercial real estate, and they just recently retired from CBRE. So I thought I would have them on the podcast because they know so much about the world of multifamily and retail in Los Angeles, and it's such a unique thing. They're kind of like the Mary Madeline and James Carville of the LA real estate community, and I thought it would be fun to have them both on and talk about what it's like today to be retired, but also the long careers you've had. So you both have had very long, storied careers, primarily with CBRE. I think you sold, Laurie, medical equipment for a number of years first, right?
That's right.
So you don't have quite the length of experience Tim does, but it's compressed there because you've done so much. And Tim, 4 decades, that's amazing.
Absolutely, right out of college.
Yeah. And CBRE is a 100-year-old plus firm.
Yeah, and originally Coldwell Banker. When we started, and at the time it was only commercial, and they hadn't even branched off into residential at the time.
Are there many people that have 4 decades of tenure there?
Very few of us that left. Jim Donnerstag in the office has just celebrated his 60th anniversary at CB.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but
I won't ask his age.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 of us, I think, in the office that we're sort of in my class that are still at the office now. But that's kind of it, other than Jim. So
we have a lot of early career people that tune into the podcast, and I think what's always interesting is how did you figure out, to get to where you were, to starting in real estate and evolving in it. So maybe, Laurie, first talk a little bit about how you entered the industry and then how you grew your career from selling medical equipment to working in, you were more in commercial real estate when you started before you became a land and multifamily expert.
That's right, yeah.
So
what
year was that?
So it was, I joined CBRE in 1988.
Yeah.
And graduated from USC with a business degree and an emphasis in the entrepreneur program. So I always wanted to start my own company. And when I graduated, my dad was an entrepreneur, had a successful business that he sold when he was 40 and he retired. And so I thought, well, maybe my dad and I would start something after I graduated from school. And he said to me, you're just book smart. You don't have street smarts yet. He said, go get a job, make mistakes on someone else's time, and then come talk to me after a few years and we'll think maybe we can start a business together.
Smart guy.
So I got a job working for a company called Baxter, which is one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. And I was selling hospital equipment to laboratories. And so chemistry analyzers, all the things that you would need in a laboratory of a hospital. And it was commission-based. I loved it. It was exciting. But I did that for a few years to get experience, and then I actually wrote a couple business plans while I was working, thinking about I would start my own some kind of business. And after I wrote a few,
something more entrepreneurial.
I wanted something more entrepreneurial. And but after I finished writing a few of the business plans, I realized at the end of the day, for a variety of reasons, I'm not going to pursue this or I'm not going to pursue that one. So it was good to kind of get it down on paper first. And then people were saying, why are you selling chemistry analyzers when you could be selling real estate? So I thought that I was leaning towards commercial instead of selling houses because I had a business background.
Had you had any interest in real estate?
I didn't really know anything about real estate.
No.
So I went on informational interviews, talked to people, and my dad was very encouraging. And he said, with real estate, you could also, your career will help you make better investments, and maybe you can one day invest in commercial real estate too. So I was doing my informational interviews, went back to USC and talked with them in the alumni department, and they gave me a name of alumni that would talk with students, and they said I could use the book, and I looked up the name and I came out with one name which was David Norcott.
I remember Dave, and I remember when you and he were a team.
Yeah, and so I met with him as an informational interview, and he ended up hiring me on his team. And so he was one of the top in the country for CB and doing commercial real estate. And he sold all different product types: office, retail, industrial, multi-housing, and hotels. So I was so excited to get the job with him, and then started working with him after.
Totally commission-based job, though, right?
Well, in the beginning, I was what they called a runner. I was on his team. I was making I think I made $14,000 that year. I took a big pay cut from what I was making at Baxter, but I looked at it like I was going back to school, like I was going to learn from the best, and he was a great mentor. And then a few things happened. There were some changes within CB. At the time, Sears was in the process of selling off CB, and there were some changes. And when there was that disruption, a lot of the competitors tried to take our best brokers at that time. And David got wooed away, and I was originally...
Colliers, I think.
I think you're right. Colliers or Cushman, and he got wooed away, and he... I was originally going to go with him and his partner, Steve Algermison, but after a number of meetings, I just felt, I think I'm going to stay back at CBRE. And he said,
you were a loyalist.
He said, how are you going to make it? And I said, I'm not sure. I'm going to bang my head against a wall until I figure it out. But I always felt I would be in their shadow, and I would never have a chance to really become a lead broker if I stayed embedded on that team. And
so you took a chance.
I took a chance, and then I ended up writing a business plan for myself to focus on one specialty type, and that's when I decided I'm going to choose multifamily. Instead of being a jack of all trade and master of none, I'm going to work with one specialty, one geography, get it down, and then try to become the expert in that region.
But in the 90s, multifamily wasn't like office or hotels or retail. It was not considered institutional grade. It was more for entrepreneurs.
Right, yeah. And it was a step down. I mean, I was used to making presentations to, the institutions of the world, large office buildings. I mean, really beautiful real estate with Dave and Steve, and now I'm sitting in somebody's kitchen at their table making a presentation to sell their apartment building for $5 million. But I just felt like that's where I could really make an impact, because of there weren't as many sophisticated brokers doing it at the time, and there also weren't that many brokers within our office. So I felt like the competition was not as steep as it would have been if I decided to go sell office buildings. I was 25 years old, and it was who's going to list a $50 million office building with me like that? It would take time.
It was really long before the run-up in values in LA, and the numbers started getting bigger. Let me shift to Tim for a second, and we'll come back. So Tim, you grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Woodland Hills.
Yes.
You're a product of Cal State Northridge.
Yes.
And public schools throughout your career.
True.
And you started, I believe, almost right out of school with CBRE, did you not?
I actually started my senior year of college as an intern.
You did?
As an intern in the Valley office.
But you had more of a family background, right?
I did.
Because your dad was a well-known executive in real estate. He was in the management side.
He was in the property management side, and he ran the Valley and the Beverly Hills offices for back then Coldwell Banker at the time. And
which was
so I was going.
Big name.
Yeah, it was, and it was at the time I was doing business at Cal State Northridge, and I also had a option in finance and also in real estate, which allowed me to get my real estate. So it basically gave me the classes to check the boxes so that I could test for the real estate license when I graduated. And going into my senior year, my dad said, why don't you come and do an internship here and see what you think of this? And he says, but I want you to be on the brokerage side. Don't come into the property management side.
Leasing.
Go in the sales and the leasing side.
So that's how you got that start into retail.
That's how I got it. The reason that I ended up in retail is that after I graduated and I was ready to try to get a job, I still had to interview for the position. I had to go through some 16 interviews, and I think
with your dad's firm.
And I think that
Wow.
I think because my dad was at the firm. They probably made it a little more challenging because they didn't want to want it to look like nepotism. So I had to go through all these interviews, and then ultimately I got hired. There were 10 applications for every seat if you could get hired, and so I finally got hired in what at the time was the Wilshire office, which used to be on Miracle Mile, long since closed. And they basically said, "We've got one spot. You're a retail guy," and I said, "I guess I'm a retail guy." So that's how I ended up.
So there were not retail experts per se in the 80s.
There were. We had specialties. So
you just got hooked. You got plugged into that.
That was they were a little shy in the retail department. I always figured I'd be an office broker. Tons of people were in the office department already at that particular office, and so they said, if you're going to come to this office, you're going to help us fill out our retail department. So that's how that evolved.
That was the start of 4 decades.
That's right.
You must know every retailer in the country. And probably most of the owners, too. Talk about early mentors. You mentioned Dave. You mentioned your dad. Who else were some of your early mentors, and how did that start to shape your career? Laurie, why don't you talk first?
Well, I'd say somebody who gave me a lot of inspiration was Darla Longo. She's the well-known industrial broker. And even back when I joined in 1988, she was already lighting the country on fire. She was amazing.
Industrial, right?
Industrial.
Yeah.
And Dave, when I got hired by CBRE, Dave said to me, "There's one person I really want you to take to lunch and find out what makes her so successful. But I don't want you to do that until after you've spent a year in the business with me, and then you could go meet with her so that you would have more intelligent questions to ask."
Right.
And so I remember the day I went out to. A year later, I met Darla out in the Ontario area where her office was, took her out to lunch, and asked her about what her secret sauce was.
What'd she say?
And she said that she felt that if she gave 110%, and most people give 100%, that she would shine. And she was right. And I felt like all the top lists that Darla was on, top in the country, all the accolades that she got, I said, so my goal was to be on the same list that Darla was on, but for multifamily as opposed to industrial.
So you aspired to manage your brokerage career in the same way Darla did.
Yeah, it was her. I guess it was her determination, and to see, especially back then, a female.
Which is unusual.
Which was unusual, and
there aren't that many female real estate investment brokers, are there?
No, there weren't at the time, and there still aren't. But the numbers are growing.
Yeah. So that mentorship played an important role in shaping your career direction.
Yeah, I think her just being a phenomenal inspiration, and then I think David also being a very thorough. I thought he was a very good broker. He was quite intelligent. He was compassionate with people, and also he was a great problem solver, and he was quite creative. And he took the time to explain things, and he was very detail oriented. So I really had a great, I guess, educational process during the 3 years that I was with him. And then, so it was scary when I decided to branch off and try it on my own, but I felt like he prepared me well.
That was a good inflection point. Tim, what about you? I mean, your dad was obviously a mentor, but who else were some of your early mentors, and how did it play into your career development?
I had two sort of different training periods. The first one was with a gentleman by the name of Mark McGoy, who is still in our Glendale office and has probably been with the company over 50 years now.
Wow.
And Mark was the mall guy. I mean, he basically leased regional malls back before they took the leasing in-house. And so my first stint was with him, learning how to deal with national retailers and working on regional malls. And then the second one, which turned out to be very beneficial, was with a guy by the name of Greg Seltzer, who ended up becoming a very good client as time went by after he had left brokerage because he was buying his own real estate. And Greg was a street broker, and we would go out before computers. We had notebooks, 3-ring binders.
You mean you'd walk up and down the street?
We'd walk up and down the street. And every page was a property with a photograph, and we'd write in all of the information about the ownerships. And so we'd walk and we'd go meet the owners, and that's how we started. ultimately, after I finished training, I ended up working with Mark on 4 regional malls over Southern California for about a year, which was terrific. I made Rookie of the Year. I had a great start, and then the client sold all 4 malls to Macerich, and they basically said, we're doing our leasing in-house, and all of a sudden I was out of business. And so that training of being a street broker really came into play, and that's what I did. I went back out on the street, and I started working in Hollywood and Koreatown right at that time, and this was in the mid-'80s. And
So in the mall world
Yes.
of leasing, is that still how it's done today?
It's
Or is it a combination?
the whole mall landscape, of course, has changed. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're demalling across the country, and so in some instances, ownership which would not work with brokerage after that period in time, that sort of late '80s is when all of the leasing went in house and they weren't using brokers anymore. That's sort of come back a little bit. There are assignments now on malls that are coming back, but a lot of it is to reposition those malls. So we are seeing involvement in that area again, but I think it's more on a repositioning situation.
Interesting. So you saw how your early mentors were influential in your career development. How have you approached being a mentor now that you're both, at the stage of your career where you've developed into one? How has that been for you?
Well, I think it's always fun for me to teach other people, and especially, first of all, people on my team. So I started to build a team, and then I saw...
Well, let's stop here for a second, because you were a very early mover in LA of, I'm going to call it the brokerage team concept. And I think you were really out in front of a lot of groups. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, what was happening was I was getting busier and busier as I was working on my own, and I was doing everything. All my own underwriting. I was putting together the packages. I didn't have an assistant at the time,
Right.
and I was working really long hours. I would be sometimes at the office until 11 p.m. and the first one to open it up in the morning at like 6:30, and I would work weekends, and I started making some really good money, and I ended up being in the top 3% in the country. Pretty soon, by 1995.
Of multi or of everything?
Everything.
Wow.
By 1995. And the company noticed that and said, we want to leverage.
Tim, is that what you noticed?
Of course.
So they said, we want to leverage you so
Yeah.
that you can be more productive. So they started saying, let's build a team.
Okay, so it was stimulated by management.
Right. Management came and said, let's build a team. And that led to a 10-person team. And we figured out how this machine was going to work. And now I would have my own analyst, which was huge. I didn't have to be doing numbers at night and weekends. I would have somebody that would help me with marketing, help me with touring properties, help me with doing the brochures. So now I could really spend my time on doing what I was probably needed the most in order to handle the business, be on the phone with the clients, problem solve, create the energy, and then a lot of the other skills that were needed to be done could be implemented by other people. So then in terms of mentor, I had to grow them on my team, and in some cases I had an assistant that came to work for me just to basically do typing. Back then, we had the typewriters and all that, and she was very smart. And I brought in an analyst to run the financial numbers, and I would have pizza come in at night, and I would teach everybody who wanted to learn about underwriting apartment buildings on this big team.
You did a lot of teaching.
I opened it up to the whole team because I was training the analyst, but I said everybody's welcome. So the assistant came, and she was getting all the answers right, even over him. So long story short, I promoted her to become the analyst, and I trained her, and she was one of my best ever. But so I mentored people within, and she was frightened of numbers, but she did a terrific job, and it stayed with me, oh my gosh, over a decade. Long time. So that was wonderful. And then there are other things. I constantly had students from different universities or come and spend a day in the life with me. They would come to meetings. They would sit in on
Like a day on the job.
a day on the job just to see what it was like to be in commercial real estate.
How many did you just scare off?
I think everybody left feeling pretty, because I love what I do.
Yeah,
And
comes
so
through.
I think I was having a great time. And when people see that you enjoy it, I think that they get excited about it. So I think everybody
they
left.
also saw the intensity, though. I think
Yeah,
you know
that's
they'd
true.
walk out of there going, "Wow, there's no time to, take
Is she
catch your
pretty
breath during the
intense,
day."
Tim?
Yeah.
She doesn't come off that way.
Laurie,
I've known her for a while.
You know, Laurie has two speeds. Pedal to the metal and off.
But she doesn't talk fast or raise her voice.
No,
though.
she doesn't.
Meters
no,
her.
No,
But it's
right.
constant.
That's right.
Right.
That's
okay.
right.
Yeah.
I think he's got your number.
Yeah.
So, all right, so
I
let's
hope
talk
so.
about there's an inflection point here. You're both working for the same company in the same office, 4 years ahead, Tim. How did this union emerge? 'Cause that's not a common thing.
Yeah, and even though I had a little more tenure, I wasn't in that office initially, so I started in what was the Wilshire office at the time. And when we hit the meltdown in the early 90s, they actually closed that office. And so then in 91, I was moved over
in the
to
LA economy,
That's
thrift
right.
and loan
Yeah, we had,
crisis and all that was there.
exactly. We had the RTC, we had the riots, we had the earthquake.
Rodney King riots.
Yeah, all of that. So when that came down, the company did a major cutback, closed a lot of offices.
Right.
And then, so in 91.
Tough time in LA.
It was a tough time in LA. It was a tough time in real estate. I think the toughest time in my career in real estate in LA. I think we really had significant impact here. A lot of foreclosures, a lot of vacancy. It was a
Like
very,
sort
it
of
was,
91-ish to 94, 5-ish.
yeah, we used to say stay alive to 95.
Yeah.
It was a very difficult time.
Now saying stay alive to 2025.
I know it.
You got out at the right time.
Yeah, it felt like it. So 91, I move over to the Beverly Hills office because they've consolidated that office, and they split the office. Half went to downtown, and I'd had a pretty decent year that year, and so I basically was able to demand to move over to the Beverly Hills office. I didn't want to go downtown anyway, and so that happened. And so
You wouldn't have met Laurie if you went downtown.
I would not have. So it's just amazing how that stuff works out. But so I ended up in that office, and we were both in relationships, but we became friendly in the office, and we got to know each other. And I was one of the early people that got into computers. I was probably one of the first people to have a laptop in
In
the
the early
office.
90s, there weren't people using computers that much.
No, they weren't.
A little bit.
They weren't. But we were starting to get them, and
Yeah.
I think I got my first laptop, which was, it was huge. But
Huge,
it was in
yeah.
the late 80s.
Even
So-
desktops were gigantic.
Yeah,
then.
they were. And so Laurie decided she wanted to get a computer, and she asked if since I sort of had some acumen in that area, if I'd help her go computer shopping. And so we spent
you're
some
such a
time.
good mentor,
Yeah, it was
You're a
hard.
computer mentor.
I couldn't turn that request down. So we spent some time together computer shopping, and again, we're still in
Very cozy.
The relationships though.
Yeah.
And so we were friends for a good year or more.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then about the same time, both of those relationships went different ways, and so
Laurie re-underwrote the deal.
so that kind of opened the door for me to sort of ask if we could push it a little further.
All right.
Yeah,
You got the deal.
I did. The best deal I ever closed.
So that was 90 what?
95, and she
30 years.
Yeah, she was very resistant at first because she didn't want to have an office romance because of the impact if it didn't work out on on the female.
Sure.
So
No,
it
it's
was
a big deal.
Yeah, so it was. So we we were very quiet about it for a good 6 months, which isn't easy when you're working in the same office together and you're walking by in the hallway and you're trying to pretend that you're just still friends. And people knew that we were friends, so I don't know that it raised any eyebrows, but it.
CBRE is a big company, and
Yeah.
you were in different specialties.
Definitely.
You're good, honest, mature people. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there was a moment or two here or there.
They were, and it was
had
it
to
was a very
navigate.
fun time. It really was.
Well, it's worked out really, really great. So, Tim, I think we talked about retail and how you came into it, but retail in LA has evolved a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it go from the sort of the corner strip centers to the mega malls to all sorts of iterations. Talk a little bit about the evolution of retail in Southern California and how it has shaped what you've done. You've sold some epic deals and been involved with leasing on some epic deals, and from Hollywood to all over the region.
And quite a bit in Hollywood. And I was really more confined to really the west side of LA, so I really worked from downtown to the water. So
Yeah.
wasn't quite the same as some of the other retail in Southern California, because we didn't have the land to build a big power center. Or, we didn't.
Right. It was infill.
Yeah, it's all infill. I mean, I did the Home Depot deal up on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Yep.
And that was an assemblage of 5 different, I think, ownerships in order to put something like that
That's a big
together.
site.
So it's very difficult to do that.
Gower, I think, in Sunset.
Just west of Western.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to put deals like that together. So we really had to sort of focus on land assemblage. And then as we got a little further into those kinds of deals, that's really when I think the idea of mixed use sort of came into the vernacular, and the cities started to embrace that. And I remember when the LA City Council was starting to say, we need to do more mixed use here. We need to do, live, work all in the same place.
More podium style buildings,
That's right.
going from
That's
garden
right.
style to that.
Right.
More density.
And so
more
I
urban.
made a conscious decision that I really wanted to get out in front of that and to really work on putting land deals together and to being involved in mixed use. And so we put the land together. We'd help design the retail, and we tried to figure out how to make the retail work with the multifamily, and then ultimately lease the project up on the retail side, and then hopefully sell it on the back end as an investment. So some of the projects like Hollywest, which was one of the early mixed-use deals we did, I think I was involved with that project for 7 years. So you had the assemblage, the development, the leasing, and then the sale on the back end. So it was a fun way to be all aspects of it. So it was very urban. So we didn't do the traditional shopping centers. We just didn't, because we were already so developed in the parcelized.
So almost specialty retail.
It was urban retail.
Interesting. So Laurie, obviously you evolved from, I'm going to call it small multifamily to bigger multifamily to land development to mega land development. And talk a little bit about your evolution through those different products in residential.
Sure. Well, back in the early 90s, when I decided to get into apartments, they were the smaller buildings, primarily, I'd say, under 20 million or so.
Yeah.
And then started to work on some of the larger deals. One of them was called the Wilshire Estina, which actually did with...
It's up in the Wilshire Corridor.
On the Wilshire Corridor. And that was at the corner of Wilshire and Beverly Glen. And that was a very exciting project. And that
Is that a Donald Sterling project?
Yep, Donald Sterling bought that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a listing broker on the deal. And I think when that happened, we sold that deal in around $40 million back
Big
in
number then.
1995. And so that sort of now really helped put me on the map to play in some of the bigger, more prominent
bought it?
buildings. That was Donald Sterling that bought it.
Oh, he bought it.
He bought it.
Yeah, then it became his
Right.
building.
Deutsche Bank had foreclosed on it from Heller Financial.
From Heller.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were so we worked on that, and that was a very exciting deal.
He's not the easiest person to deal with.
No, but we closed it fast.
Yeah.
And he still owns it today. He renamed it the Sterling International Towers.
Of course.
Yes. Right. So, but then so I kept working along, doing a lot of multifamily, and then in the early 2000s, the condo market started heating up.
Yes.
And that got really hot. And the analyst on my team had actually worked for a city planning department. So she was very familiar with codes, with planning and redeveloping. And so we started looking at older apartment buildings to see if they were good for condo conversions or if it made sense to demo the whole apartment building and use the land and build a condominium project.
On the west side, you could do that.
On the west side, right. So we started analyzing buildings that way. And then all of a sudden we were taking properties out to the market, an existing older apartment building, and we were repositioning it in our sales pitch as a condo conversion or a tear down to build condos. And we started getting a lot of interest from the development community. And then as those properties were being sold, owners were calling that owned these 1950s apartment buildings saying, hey, can you take a look at our building? Maybe our building could be good for a tear down. So now I was doing a lot of residual land analysis versus as is, sell it as an apartment building today, or is it worth more for land value? And then my business just grew and grew, and then that led to the sale of the big one in 9900. Yeah, 9900.
Talk about the big
Wilshire.
one.
So
That was, I think it's still the record, right? The largest
probably
unentitled land sale in LA City history, I think.
I would think so. Yeah.
Actually, is it Beverly Hills history or?
It's Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we were touting at the time that we thought it was the highest paid per unit, west of Manhattan
Condos,
in the country for land development per unit. Right.
So it's the epic site that hugs the intersection of Wilshire and Santa Monica Boulevard, which is now behind the Waldorf and the Beverly Hilton. It was former Robinson's May site.
Right.
And it butts up against LA Country Club on the north side.
On the west side.
On the west side.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was about 8 acres, and New Pacific Realty Corp owned it.
I know Dave and Arnie.
Yes, and they bought it in 2004 for $33.5 million. And we're going to sit on it. They had a long-term lease with the Robinson's May department store at a very, very low lease rate. It was way under market. Mm-hmm. So I think they saw it as a land value. Let's just sit and hold it because it wasn't much cash flow. So then a miracle happened, and the company that owned the Robinson's May department store was acquired by Federated.
Right.
And so they already owned Macy's, and they had a Macy's in the Century City Mall, and the Robinson's May department store wasn't doing that great, so they decided they wanted to break their lease.
So they did.
So they did. So this happens in a couple of years after New Pacific Realty bought it. Well, when the lease was broken, because they wanted out, and of course New Pacific was like, great, you can leave. That unlocked the value of the land tremendously. So I marketed it with them or for them in 2006, and we found a buyer in London.
The Candy Brothers.
Candy and Candy, and they were known for building a property called One Hyde Park in London that had traded for the highest price per unit of any condo in the world. I think they led with it was a $140 million deal. It was about $10,000 a square foot.
Wow.
And this is mid 2005, 6. So anyway, fast forward now, Candy and Candy, they end up closing on it at $500 million. So unentitled. So they now they pursue getting it entitled, and so this is 2007. They close. By 2008 or so, they've got the entitlements. Now they can build the condos, 252 condos and about 40,000 square feet of retail.
Richard Meyer Design, as I recall.
Yep, Richard Meyer Design, and it was all going very well, but then we had the whole subprime, debacle, and we went into a deep recession, and their short-term debt, they were financed with the Bank of Iceland.
Right.
All of a sudden their debt was due, and they couldn't get construction financing to build this beautiful condominium because this was going to be super high-end and luxury.
Like a giant iceberg.
Yep, and they couldn't.
They
couldn't. So anyway, the Bank of Iceland went out. Actually,
Yeah.
It was taken over by the government. They lost They had about 135 million of cash into the deal, but before they did, what ended up happening was they went and they found Carlos Slim out of Mexico.
Slim, right.
And
to do a mezz deal.
Carlos gave them the financing so that they could get out of some of the other debt that they had. And then soon later they couldn't pay Carlos. So Carlos ends up foreclosing on them in 2010. So the deal's entitled. Carlos gives them $145 million, which is what they needed to plug the hole at that time. Mm-hmm. They can't service their debt. Carlos takes it back in 2010, and he very quickly wants just to get his money back. So he does like a private auction on the deal. I was not involved in that sale, except for I helped consult with the buyer that bought it, but I didn't represent them as the broker.
I remember them coming over to Kennedy Wilson when I was there talking about the debt.
Yes, they were. So
I think his son was involved in this as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And well, after Carlos sold this property very quickly to a company out of Hong Kong called Joint Treasure.
Joint Treasure. Sure.
Joint Treasure buys the deal for $148 million, which was what Carlos was owed. So Carlos comes
Everything
out.
else was wiped out.
Everything was wiped out. Carlos gets his $148 million back. Now Joint Treasure owns it. It's 2010.
A third of the former basis.
Right. And so they sit on it. They don't advance. They don't do anything. We're in 2010. The market's it's coming back, but it's still not great. And they wait and they wait, and then they decide around 2014
And you got the nod again.
that they thought now would be a good time to put the property on the market. So
Good rebound, Laurie.
yeah, so they listed the property with me, and now we did a full-out global marketing of the property. And at first, we went out unpriced, whisper number. They were hoping to get at least into the 350 million range, but we had 19 offers at the time, and it was very competitive. It got down to the 3 top buyers. 2 were foreign, 1 was domestic, and it got bid up, and it finally ended up closing at like $420 million. And that went to Beijing-based the Wanda Group.
The Wanda Group, yeah.
And Wanda was thrilled to get the deal. They had high aspirations for it. They branded it One Beverly Hills, and they were very excited to move it forward. They actually went back and changed the entitlements, and they got approval to change it to include a hotel. And that
Did
was
they reduce the number of condos?
They did.
Yeah.
They did, and they swapped that out for hotel. And so that was all going along very smoothly. But then my understanding is the Chinese government put some pressure on Wanda, said, you know what, we want you to bring your money back to our country. And so Wanda had to sell the property. And they ended up selling it to the Kane International.
The Kane International people
Right.
who have finally broken ground on it.
Yes.
I see a big hole over there.
Right.
So, Laurie, you went from selling small apartment buildings in Brentwood and the West Side to one of the biggest international deals that went from England. I believe, wasn't Qatar involved in that deal too? Bank of Iceland, Carlos Slim, and then the Wanda Group, and now, is it Kane?
Kane International.
But you had left it after the 2014, but it's amazing the evolution of that site.
Yes.
And they're going to hit the market, I think, in a couple years.
Yeah.
They're going to be the most expensive condos, I think, in LA.
I would think so. And they're also going to have, it's going to be a 78-room, all-suite, 10-story Amman hotel, which is all about wellness and healthy living, but very high-end. They're going to have a 100,000 square foot community center for just the members of the Amman Hotel Group. And it'll be like a private club that's 100,000 square feet.
It'll be very international.
Right. And then there's going to be 2 towers. One's 26 stories, the other's 32. And they're going to be about just under 200 condos, roughly. It depends, because they're not sure if people are going to buy.
I have a great idea. Maybe as a third iteration, you could form a condo sales team.
There you go.
And sell it out.
Yeah, that would
So,
be
Tim,
fun.
tell me about a small, simple deal that you did.
I was going to say, there's not
I
a
know
lot I can
it's-
say to hold the candle to that, but
So you're used to her all the time on the phone, right?
Yeah.
I've heard stories about famous boating incidents where Laurie's been remanded to the fly bridge,
yeah,
so she doesn't interrupt your flow.
So Laurie, pretty much 24/7, during her career, and we got together, and we found that since we're both in the business, that we'd get home and we'd be talking about real estate until all hours of the night.
Yeah, just like James and Mary.
And so, I came up with this rule that she mostly abided by early
The curfew.
on. It was
The Laurie
it was
Lustig Bauer curfew.
That's right. That at 9 o'clock we had to talk about something other than real estate. You know, we were in a relationship now. You know, we got
Not
married
before dinner. It would be after dinner.
No. And you know, in those days we were both working kind of up and through dinner.
By then you've had 2 glasses of wine.
Well, and that, you know, that helps. But then by 9 o'clock, it's you know, we got to talk about something before we go to bed, because otherwise you never have a break.
Right.
Some of us need breaks.
That's what Netflix
some of us
is for.
don't. Yeah. So anyway, so that we implemented that, and then
I've been on the phone with her like at 10 or 11 talking about deals.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Flybridge incident, my folks had a boat and we'd be over in Catalina Island, and my stepmom Sherry, who ran our Newport Beach office for CB, so really all of the family, and Sherry would go up on the Flybridge and talk about deals and talk about business, and my dad and I would sit down in the cockpit and kind of enjoy the day. And so we kind of had a little separation, so because Dad and I on the weekends we were trying to talk about other things other than real estate.
So you have fond memories of the Flybridge, Laurie?
Yes, I love talking to Sherry. She was great.
Sherry's great.
She's also a good mentor, by the way, too. When you talk about that, she really has a great understanding of what it takes to get a deal done, and also to how to run your business, run a team. So I would always go to her for advice if I was having a challenge with a person, how to approach them, or even a deal structural issue. And I love getting advice from her. She's very motivational and quite a strategic thinker. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, even talking about retiring, I went to her for coaching on.
It's hard to retire.
Right. Like, and was I ready, and the pros and cons, and so she's terrific. And
it's interesting how you both came to the inflection point in your careers where you made the decision jointly to retire. That's not that common for people.
No, and it was deliberate, and the fact that we both did work in the same industry, we came to a point, I think, where, first of all, we saw the market had just really taken a turn for the worse, and deals were becoming very difficult.
Yeah. And
I had been sort of talking to Laurie about, at some point, let's open a new chapter. And I'd probably been talking to her about that for a couple of years. Well, we reached a point where the market had changed. We have parents that are aging that we want to spend time with, and that are in need of some assistance with their medical care. And we also realized that we've been doing this for almost 40 years, and our runway isn't as long as it used to be. So we really want to spend time together, spending time with our family and time traveling. Our daughter had graduated from USC and has a job, and it was just everything sort of lined up. So we really started having these discussions, and Laurie was very reluctant at first, but as the discussions involved, I think, and particularly with some of the things that were going on with her parents, she started to make that shift, and then she had some of those conversations with Sherry about lifestyle and all of that. And so we really did come to the decision at the same time, and that decision happened at sort of early 2024. And we really did it gradually. We met with a company who was terrific about supporting us through this. And
with CBRE.
We did.
Management.
With management. And they were very supportive and very helpful. And so we decided that we were just going to kind of take the year to quietly ramp down our business and wind down. And we really didn't we made the announcement, not until November, right? It's kind of
beginning of December.
Beginning of December.
Any so-called buyer's remorse during the course of this?
No.
Why am I doing this?
For me, it was very seamless. It was very easy. Well, there was no looking back. I think Laurie was a little harder for it.
Yeah, a little bit of withdrawal.
Well, sometimes.
But you're doing a good job. Well, I don't see you on the phone at all. So.
No, I'm not on the phone right now. But my team. I took the year of 2024, this past year, to really transition so that my two partners, Katie and Cameron, could take over and run with the team going forward. And so that last year was a transition year. So it kind of was really gradual for me. So I think I really needed that year because I didn't have to go cold turkey right away. But watching them go to a listing presentation and me not go with them, that was hard because I wanted
Sure.
them to be able to do it on their own. And if I kept going with them, it wouldn't, it wouldn't give them the experience that they needed. So that was hard to sit back. And even today, they'll call me occasionally because we still keep in touch and everything, and they'll ask me, well, what do you think about this, or how should we underwrite that, or and how
It's hard
should
to go
right.
from team leader to being an observer of the team,
Yes.
but you did it.
She did
Yeah.
I have this little memento here, if you hone in on it. This is a sailboat that Laurie and someone else gave me who worked on this deal. This was my first deal at Kennedy Wilson called, it was on Manchester, 7600 Manchester. And that's when I first met you.
Yes.
And I'll never forget, you pulled up, it was like around, I don't know, maybe it was the late summer, early fall. It was a little chilly. And your license plate said 4 cap, okay? Or maybe, did it say 4 or 6
It
then?
said
I
6
think
cap
it said 6,
at
and
the
you lowered it
time.
to 4.
That's
Right.
right.
But
Okay.
you sold that deal for me in record time. It was a flip deal for 3 months, and you sold it to David Nagel.
That's right. Yeah.
And the rest was history. So I still have that little memento there, Laurie.
Yo, that's great.
really nice.
Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
I
others
remember
from you
that.
too, but that was probably the most epic of. It was an early deal for me back at the beginning of starting of my institutional experience at Kennedy Wilson. So we appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know Tim, you worked on the Vermont for me.
I worked on the Vermont for you,
retail
which I
side.
enjoyed. Yeah, we worked on the
We
retail.
survived that together.
We did, and I did a lot in Koreatown, and I did, I did quite a bit, as I mentioned, in Hollywood. We sold the Hollywood Palladium, and we sold the El Capitan building, among other things, and those were, the year that Laurie sold 9900 in 2007 was the year I sold the Palladium. So we both kind of had these significant deals that really sort of elevated our stature, I think, in the industry, and really,
Yeah, those
business-
are major deals.
Yeah, and business breeds business, and I think that was a breakout year for both of us.
Let's talk for a minute. The title of this podcast is called Building Better Communities, because the people we have on the podcast are people that truly care about the communities they live and work in whatever manner that is important to them and to their constituents. So I know you guys have been involved in mentoring, teaching. Laurie, I think you're on the Cedars-Sinai Board of Governors. And I know you even sponsored a young woman in Kenya to help her with her schooling. But talk a little bit about what's important to you guys as you enter your retirement years and what you're doing to support whatever community it is that you desire.
I think that right now for me, I'm excited to continue teaching at UCLA and USC as a guest speaker.
Adjunct.
But nothing, where a professor invites me to come in for one of the
Right.
classrooms and teach real estate or things about business planning, career planning, that type of thing. In fact, I have a panel discussion I'm going to be on for USC next week, so I'm excited to do that.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think that I'm really trying to be thoughtful about where I want to spend my time. And since this is all, the unwinding that took place last year of the business and everything, now that I'm having a little bit more time in my life, I can start really thinking about where do I want to spend my time in terms of giving back to the community. And for sure, I enjoy teaching with the universities, but even maybe something more where there's an underserved community that I can help out, whether it's being on the board or actually rolling up my sleeves and helping to do events or something to raise money for a good cause. But I'm trying to find my place in that, and I think now this year will be the time to do that.
It is a big shift because
Yeah.
we're so devoted to our industry.
Right.
And we really did spend a lot of time, both of us.
Now, you're both highly focused on your careers.
But we also both spent a lot of time with young people coming and visiting. Whenever somebody would come and interview for a retail position, management would have them sit down with me, just like Laurie would spend a day with somebody. So we really enjoyed doing a lot of that. And I think we'd still be open to doing that. But, when you step away, you're not front and center with management. So it's not something that continues. So I think we're both sort of transitioning into what that next step looks like.
It sounds like very comfortably. Mm-hmm. So I know you guys just came back from a global trip. You went to New Zealand.
We did.
So tell us a little bit about that, and tell us a little bit about what the next chapter is going to look like, if you could predict it.
We want to do a lot of travel, and we've already got a bunch of stuff lined up. But New Zealand was fabulous. We loved the country. The people were incredibly friendly.
You went to both islands?
We went to both islands. We spent almost 3 weeks there, top to bottom. Very, varied geography that we got to experience all of it. Great food, great people. Really pleasant place to be. And so we loved every bit of it. And we're going to be in the Caribbean over the summer. We're going to do a cruise in Canada with her family later in the year. We're going to do some more international travel. And we're still just kind of sitting down and creating our list, and we'll start booking stuff for 2026 here, I think, pretty soon. So
that was pretty good.
Yeah.
So thank you both for coming on the podcast. It's been great having you, and
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Tim
for
and Laurie.
inviting us.